So let's just do the 8 verses, I think, for the remainder of our time together. So we'll leap ahead here to the technique that actually culminates in what's called Tonglen in Tibetan, giving, taking. And that's come from these 8 verses. This is from Lungri Tangpa, who was one of the disciples of Drog Tompa, who was one of the main disciples of Atisha, 11th century people, you know. The forerunners of the Gelug tradition. And all the holy beings refer to these texts, you know. Excuse me. So this is the 8 verses from this tradition of Lojong. This kind of radical approach to smashing ego grasping, smashing self-cherishing. Just say the verses. And these verses, I always read them and I always get so shocked because they're so outrageous. This is why it's so fascinating. When you think about emptiness, we kind of find it fascinating. We like it. It's delicious and exciting, you know, and it's kind of hard to comprehend. We hear these kind of teachings and they're kind of simple words. They're simple. But if we analyze carefully the meaning, these are shocking words. This is what they kept secret. It's really hard to think about. This is what they kept secret. But it seems kind of cute. Because when we hear about love and compassion, we get all gooey, you know. But do not think this way. These verses are outrageous. So let's just analyze them roughly. So the first one says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Don't ask me what a wish-fulfilling jewel is. It must have been a few eons ago they had a thing called a wish-fulfilling jewel. Just sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? I'll hold them most dear at all times. Now those words are really easy to comprehend, English-speaking wise. So let's analyse them and see how shocking they are. So first of all, let's remember, please, let's remember. The person who wrote these words, I think it's important to remember, they either made them up and are just pretending, or they're genuine. Are you seeing what I'm saying here? If this were a cookbook, the guy who wrote the book, the woman who wrote the book, you either think they've actually made these cakes, which just means it's their own experiential knowledge, or they've stolen them, or maybe they're quoting their mummy. Do you understand what I'm saying? A person who doesn't know how to make a cake couldn't write a recipe. So we have to deduce that the recipes are coming from the experience of the person who wrote the book. That's an important point about these type of teachings. Must be coming from the person who's experienced this. Do you understand what I'm getting at? And I find it kind of powerful, you know. So let's analyse these simple words. Well, first of all, he says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit. It says, from all sentient beings. That sounds weird to us. We tend to think it should be saying, get the greatest possible benefit for all sentient beings. But there's a very specific way they teach, meaning that if we're trying to cultivate, our practice here is to cultivate compassion. So compassion is empathy with the suffering of others. Now, if you never met any suffering people, how could you get compassion? It will be impossible, don't you agree? Do you accept? Can you see the point? If you never met suffering, you'd never have compassion. So that's in that sense, given that we're in the world full of suffering sentient beings, let's get the benefit from those suffering sentient beings and begin to grow this incredible compassion. So the way they say it is we rely upon suffering sentient beings. And as Geshe Sopa says, bodhisattvas rely upon their enemies, best one of all. And this is what this text is about. So this first one, so you've got to make the most of all these sentient beings. We want to generate compassion. So it says, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't move me in the slightest. I don't even know what a ridiculous wish-fulfilling jewel is. But if you put there $1 million, then I will perk up. Who are more precious than $1 million. Now, excuse me, analyse that statement. I don't think I believe that. I think if I had a choice between all sentient beings who are suffering or $1 million, I'm sorry, I'd find it very hard to say no to the $1 million. Are you hearing me, people? Yeah. I mean, it all sounds so lovely, you know. Oh, I'm more precious than the wish, blah, 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 you know. It's an outrageous statement. Who's precious? Maybe your baby. Maybe your husband for a while is precious. All sentient beings? Excuse me. Yeah, I'm speechless. This is only verse 1. Each gets worse. So I'm going to hold them, hear the words please, all of them most dear at all times. So clearly this person must have realised this, which is kind of intense. So don't take these verses for granted, think, oh, aren't they cute, aren't they nice? We say all these words, it's so easy. This is more hard than emptiness, I'm quite sure, and this is the first of the 8, okay? I always say it like this, and it might sound a bit dramatic, but trying to get my point, We just read these words so casually. We say them, determined to me, the event of all sending me is more precious than wishful enjoy. I hold them most dear at all times. Then you get mad at your husband the next second, because it shows how deep our habits are. So the next one is, this is, I always joke and I say this one, if you're a therapist, especially in the West, if you gave this advice to your clients, somebody would sue you. You listen. This is too hard to bear, this one. This is so shocking. When in the company of others, when you're with others, at work, at home, with a family, at a party, in the street, at the airport, just ordinary, in the traffic, hear it, wait, in the traffic, best in Delhi. You listen to it now, the advice. I will always see myself as the lowest of all and see everybody else as superior. Hear the words, please. Just hear those simple English words. Isn't that insane? Check the last time you were in the traffic. You thought you were the lowest of all, and everybody else, all the rickshaw drivers, all those rude cars jumping in, all those people blocking you, all the people going across the red light, not even you are lower, not just you are the lowest, but they are superior to you. I'm sorry. In fact, it sounds unhealthy. It sounds like, excuse me, I already think I'm the lowest of all. What are you trying to do, make me miserable? We have no framework for this, no context. It's too insane. Are you hearing me, people? It's too ridiculous. In ordinary psychological model, an ordinary view of an ordinary person who's got lots of low self-esteem and we hate ourselves and we feel guilty and we think we're bad. And now we're told to even see ourselves as not just lower than my husband, but lower than everybody. Not only that, but to see them as superior. I mean, it's madness. No wonder they kept this stuff secret. I'm serious. So you've got to know what you're doing here. Pabonka Rinpoche says, to hear this kind of teaching, you've got to be a suitable vessel. And this means, because this is not just university level, which is compassion wing. Junior school is back off and protect yourself and don't harm others. There's no discussion of compassion at the first level. Then you go and look at your mind. There's still no compassion discussion. It's all about yourself. The wisdom wing is you really getting some sense of who you are and your own sense and having some compassion for yourself, if you like. Now we can afford to go to the compassion wing, and this is the most advanced level of the compassion wing. This insane level. And so you've got to understand the logic behind these instructions. And if you are not ready to do it, do not apply them. Please. If you're in a relationship with a crummy husband, let's say, or a crummy wife, who dominates you, who bullies you, you feel a victim, you feel not fair, you're poor, you're scared, you're a baby, you're victim mentality, that means you've got no self-respect, it means you've got masses of attachment, you've got masses of anger, masses of jealousy, masses of low self-esteem, join the club here, then this practice is not for you. I'm sorry, it's serious, this is too advanced. But we have to see it like that, because we can so easily misread this, and then try and become all holy and get all twisted and demented, This is intense stuff. So, and it says, I will always consider myself the lowest of all, when in the company of others. And it's just not just see them as superior, but from the depths of my heart, see them as supreme. This is too hard to bear. Even as I hear this, I've been reading this how many years, and still I go, this is insane. This is too high. I can hear the logic of it. At least if you know the logic of it. The logic of this is to put an atomic bomb under self-cherishing when you're ready to do it. When you're advanced. When you've done the wisdom wing. When you've got some renunciation. When you understand your delusions. When you've got some sense of emptiness. When you've got some idea. It's a highly evolved practice. It's intense. So how do you apply this every day? Because to say that I'll do it all the time is too extreme. To say that I'll see everybody as supreme is too extreme. It's like insane. All you can do is say the words and aspire to it. But how would you in reality attempt to put it into practice in theory? Well, the best I can ever come up with, is one person at a time. So I think this is where it becomes powerful. If you think of one person you don't like, a person who's mean to you, we've all got somebody in the family, at work. This is when it can be a real practice. All you got to do is think of something about that person that's actually better than you. Not like, oh, she's got cute ears, but I've got better feet. No, her ears are better than mine. Try and think of something about you that's not as good as that person, and that they've got a quality or something tiny that's better than you. Maybe they've got a prettier house, and I'm meaning ordinary things. A nicer house, a bigger house, more money, beautiful ears, better than you, purposely. This then is really putting this into practice. Are we hearing me? It's very simple. It's very realistic. This is too grand and outrageous. If you can do it, fantastic. But that's when you really put it into practice. Because even with our best friends, this is so embarrassing to admit. Look how we are, even with our best friends. Because we have this sense of a separate self, because we have ego grasping, because we have attachment, because we have self-cherishing, just join the club here. It's called samsara. Naturally and spontaneously and instinctively, you're with your friend, and even as you're listening to her, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, she's talking too much. She's looking a bit fat now. Her lipstick's a bit red. I don't like that dress. But you're smiling. We can't help it. It's very embarrassing to admit this, but this is natural. We've got to see it because we're always putting ourselves up. Or if we've got low self-esteem, see, this is where it's a bit tricky about low self-esteem. Low self-esteem, this is very embarrassing to hear, is the flip side of arrogance. If we didn't have arrogance, we would not have low self-esteem, I promise. Arrogance is this unhappy, stressful feeling that I should be better than others, and we're desperately hoping we will be better than others, and my house is better, my money's more, my feet are nicer, whatever it might be. And it's very stressful. And as soon as we meet somebody who's got a better house or prettier feet, then we flip down to, oh, I'm nobody. Low self-esteem is the flip side of pride. And if we didn't have pride, we wouldn't have low self-esteem. This is really interesting to hear. We all love to know we've got low self-esteem, and we all got it. But it's because we've got arrogance and pride, which is embarrassing to even admit, So we can't help but always be differentiating ourselves from others. And always, whenever we talk about our friends, and we look at our language carefully, we're always making sure we put ourselves up, and that's why we criticize people. Always they this and they that and they this. The assumption is I'm not that, they're this. We observe our words, it's kind of intense, So this is such a profound practice. One person. In your mind, you don't go and say it to them, they're just showing off. You think of that one person you don't like, even your friend, and genuinely think they're better than me at that. That's already profound practice, I think, of this philosophy. Are we communicating here? It makes sense, doesn't it? It's not just this vague notion, oh, I'll see myself as the lowest of all. You don't even know how to put it into practice. It's too extreme, but make it real and then gradually build up that. But it's quite profound practice because you could argue the only person who's capable of doing it to this degree is a person who's got realization of emptiness, who's already got bodhicitta, who's already got incredible renunciation, meaning incredible respect for themselves, they've grown themselves to an amazing degree. It's only a humble person who could do this, A low self-esteem person, forget it. That's ego, Are we communicating? So the next one is just, it's interesting. It's about yourself this time. It's about the mind. It says, vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I'll confront and avert it without delay. And even this is kind of shocking, So what it's saying is, that this particular state of mind, as Holiness calls it, the policeman. It's one of these many states of mind functioning all the time. And it's called vigilance or alertness. It's just it's a state of mind that we need to, it's doing a job, it's always watching. It's many parts of our mind all working together. This one, especially in meditation, vigilance has to be there to really make sure we stay on track, not forget things, etc., etc. In our daily life as well. And this is a very powerful function in our mind every day, which is what he's saying here. So having this vigilance, observing your thoughts. The moment you notice a delusion, attachment, anger, resentment, jealousy, you name it, you'll grab it, confront it, argue with it, and avert it. Because it's endangering you and others. Now this implies a really advanced person, I'm sorry. The assumption here is that virtue is in the mind all the time, and then a naughty little delusion pops up every now and again. Well, I think for me it's the other way around. Delusions are default mode, and then a virtue might pop up. So this is already implying a really advanced mind. What at least we can do is have some vigilance, observe our thoughts. And this is the real key to genuine success in daily practice, you know. The trouble with most of us is that certainly in my culture, materialist culture, which is most of us these days, we're not brought up with any introspection whatsoever, because we think our mind's the brain. We don't notice our thoughts until they're vomiting out the mouth. You don't notice you're depressed until you can't get out of bed one morning, because we haven't cultivated this marvellous skill of observing our thoughts. It's nothing cosmic. So the ability to observe our thoughts, and we get better and better and better at it, enables us to get deeper and deeper and grab the thoughts before they become full-fledged emotions. We only notice our thoughts now when they hit the body. That's what we mean by emotions and feelings. It's a physical feeling. That anger, that jealousy, it's a physical feeling, isn't it? That's only because we've noticed it then. We don't notice what we think until it hits the body. That's our tragedy, because we don't have these skills of introspection. That's why we've got to learn to concentrate. We've got to learn this Buddhist model of the mind. So we start to develop this subtler, more clear capacity to notice the thoughts well before they get to the level of feeling. This is the point that Buddha's making. All these illusions, you know, in our mind now, it's like there's this kind of background noise the whole time, isn't it? From the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep. There's all the background stuff just never ending. We call it our unconscious, you know, it's just never ending. These millions of thoughts just in the background, like a noise, you know. We never pay attention. In modern psychology, there's no method for paying attention to them. They just sound mysterious. But this is Buddha's point, why we have to get samadhi, why we have to get concentration. We'll have this ingenious, brilliant, clear skill to notice every single thought and be in complete control of them. This sounds insane in our world. But this is what we have to learn to do eventually. That's why even a little bit every day of some kind of meditation, you know, any kind, to get the habit of getting out of your head. And then you apply this technique in your daily life, where you're vigilant and you're not just noticing what's in front of you, you're noticing your thoughts. So normally we're driving the car, we're noticing the driver, we're thinking about things unconsciously, then the car leaps in front of you and you suddenly get angry, because we're not paying attention to the thoughts. But if we're also using this skill to not just pay attention to the outside, to the person, the traffic, but you're paying attention to your thoughts, then you're going to grab them before they become full-fledged emotions. It's obvious. And by the end of the day, guess what? You won't be out of your brain. You won't be freaking out. You won't be stressed. That's all that stress and depression and anger are, and the panic that we feel every day, is that all the undealt with thoughts. That's all. So Buddha's view is not kind of cosmic. It's just hard work, paying attention to your thoughts. And then recognizing with this discrimination, that's a delusion, that's a virtue. Delight in the delusion, virtues, grow them, and counteract the delusion. It's like cognitive therapy. Buddha's a cognitive therapist, a brilliant cognitive therapist. This is daily practice. So these next 3 verses, are we doing okay? I'm not giving you any break, I'm sorry. We're going to finish soon. Do you want a drink or something? Good on you. Get a drink. He's getting a drink. Shall I continue? We'll finish soon, I think. We had enough. Exhausting. Okay, these next three, the way I like to put it is, these 3, you can see, are all in relation to how other beings, sentient beings, impact upon us. The first lot, it seems to me, is the most distant. The people you read about and hear about. The next one are a bit closer to home, and my sense is maybe that's work. And the closest one is the beloveds. This is my way of putting it, and you'll hear my point. So the first one, you know, it says here, and remember this is 11th century Tibet, okay? Try and imagine. It says, whenever I see beings, and here the words are so cute, who are wicked in nature. Well, I don't think we talk like that now, do we? I think we would rather say the psychopaths. Isn't that a word we use these days? Psychopath? When we read about the psychopaths, and it says here, and so indeed, who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, we get that. But then it says, I'll hold such rare ones as dear. Well, I don't think rare these days because of, of the media. Everything's instantaneous because we see all the world all the time, and because indeed maybe we're more deluded and more crazy now. I don't know. I don't think it's common. I don't think you'd say it's uncommon to read about psychopaths, murderers, rapists. I mean, even meeting one rapist in Tibet in the 11th century might have been a rare person. I'm not sure. Do you understand my point? You're not, unless you're in some kind of war zone, you're not going to see, and they didn't have wars in Tibet, or you had a few, I think. So I think, this one is not so rare. You read the papers every day, you're reading about psychos every single day who are overwhelmed by delusions, overwhelmed by negativity, overwhelmed by suffering. So what's our attitude meant to be to all these maniacs? To act as if I found a precious treasure. So what's the logic there? The whole point of all these verses, the only point of these verses, is to use all the circumstances of our daily life as grist for the mill for our development of this insane levels of love and compassion. That's it. That's the bottom line. And it's this extreme level of using crazy people and harmful people as, as these beings whom we have immense compassion for. This is not, the first level of compassion, you have compassion for your baby. Here, this is a radical level, where you're not just having that, but you're being happy to see the craziest of people, and you just feel like you've found a precious treasure. Meaning, and this is, okay, again to repeat, this is the meaning of compassion. Okay, we should go back to basics here. What's compassion? All right? Compassion starts with the bare bones thought. May you not suffer. Then great compassion. Oh my goodness, what can I do to take it away? So then before we even go there, let's get clear again, please. We need to do this. What if compassion is empathy for someone suffering? We better get our definition of suffering clear. And this is the biggest problem, because right now, generally the world, when we say suffering, we only think of the gross level of suffering, when the bad things happen, like war, children getting harmed, animals being abused, our friends being hurt. So we only think of suffering as the gross kind. And second, we only think of a few people. Our friends, our beloveds, our people. So this is not the view of suffering here. So this is why we have to learn in the Four Noble Truths, which is what we do on the Wisdom Wing. We learn about what suffering is. So in the First Noble Truth, and it's called the Four Noble Truths, but to be perfectly precise, it should be called the Four Facts, because a fact is a truth. The Four Facts for the Noble Ones. The truths aren't noble, actually. It's simply the four facts of life for those who've realized it, the noble ones. So the first fact of life is that there is suffering. The second one, there are causes. The third one, guess what, folks? You can be free of it. And the fourth is how to do it. It's Buddhist teachings, the first teaching he gave. So the first one, then there is suffering. So that Buddha talks about 3 levels of suffering. And this is what we have to get clear. And in the second scope in high school on the Wisdom Wing, this is for ourself. To understand for ourself. So when we get clear what suffering is for ourself, and second noble truth, understand the causes of my suffering, then I will have renunciation, which is like compassion for myself. I will be so sick of suffering, but now I know the causes. And guess what the causes are? My karma and my delusions. So this is what brings this incredible sense of renunciation, which is a feeling of like, you can say it's like compassion for yourself, an incredible sense of self-respect. You're in charge of your life. You stop being a victim. You're giving up attachment. You're giving up blaming. You're giving up self-pity. That's what renunciation brings. It sounds like forbidding to be renounced. It means you're this marvelous person who's full of life and energy and enthusiasm and self-respect. Because now you know what suffering is, you know you're sick of it, and now you know the causes. That's like the main point. So when you got that for yourself, now you can have it for others. So you cannot have compassion until you've got renunciation, as His Holiness says. So then let's look just briefly at the 3 kinds of suffering. We have to understand this. Otherwise we don't even know what Buddha's talking about. The first kind of suffering, he calls it the suffering of suffering, which is regular suffering. Everybody in the universe agrees with this one. And this is when the bad things happen. Putting it really simply, the suffering of suffering is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. The mean husband, the red light, the pain in the knee, when all the bad things happen. Of course, to the most intense level of bad, everybody knows that's called suffering. That's when unpleasant feelings are triggered. Remember the feelings? Unpleasant feelings, that's called suffering. And we all know that's when the bad things happen. So we spend our lives trying to avoid that. But that's just the first kind of suffering. The second kind of suffering is much more subtle and more hard to see and understand. And until we begin to get this, we'll never get renunciation. The second kind of suffering is called, Buddha calls it simply, the suffering of change. Sounds so boring, you know. But what he's meaning by this, which is now it sounds very depressing, is what we call happiness. So basically, if we take the second noble truth, where he outlines the causes of suffering, and he says there are 2 main causes of my suffering. One is karma, the past action, and 2 is the delusion that impelled that action. They are the 2 causes of my present suffering. And indeed, conversely, the 2 causes of my happiness are my past virtuous action impelled by a virtuous state of mind. Same logic. So, when I understand that, which is the causes, then when I look at the mind, and effectively, as we've been talking, Buddha's saying that the main delusion effectively in day-to-day life is attachment. The root delusion is ego grasping. But effectively, in this realm that we live in this body of attachment, this body of a junkie that has 5 senses that attachment craves to fulfill the needs of every second. This is the second kind of suffering, Buddha calls it. We call it happiness. So for us, the first kind of suffering is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's what we call suffering. That's easy. But the second one is more nuanced. That's when attachment does get what it wants, which we think of as happiness. What else is it? Of course it is. Pleasant feelings are called happiness. But all Buddha's saying to us, which is sort of cruel of him to point it out, because we don't know any other way to get happy. The only way we know how to get happy, right, is to get an object of the senses. Would we agree? Pleasant people, nice sounds, nice smells, nice tastes, pleasant environment, people loving us. That's our method for getting pleasant feelings. We don't know any other method. Would we agree with this? If we don't have nice food and don't have a nice house and have mean, ugly husbands and pains in the knee all the time, of course we call that suffering. There's no happiness at all because we're not getting pleasant feelings. That's all we know of. So the only way we know how to trigger pleasant feelings, which is what is happiness, Buddha says that, is to get a nice object, a pleasant person, praise, affection, money, food, cool on a hot day, warmth on a cool day. That's our method. It's the method of a junkie. It's attachment. Attachment's a junkie that needs the fix all the time. That's what we are in. That's what samsara is.